Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing live show number 317. And so begins our new formatting, which is single topic per show and what will be a lead host. Given the fact that we are just now transitioning over to this format, I didn't want to tax my usual cadre of co hosts that have been so generous with their time over the years with guess what? We're changing this and you're first up. So I thought I'd take on the task of doing this first with creating a single topic for discussion today, which is creating and starting initial ad campaigns. From my business, what I do for our clients and in consulting and for the variety of people that we get to work with, it's often a tackled topic. It's great that they know they need to do something. It's great that something needs to get done, but it's also very challenging as to where do you start? As they often say, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. Where do you begin this process? Uh, to be contrite and say that all places are different and all circumstances are different would be a statement of the obvious, Captain Obvious statement. It's really about first defining what it is that you want. It's easy to identify your own unique stature, and for all considerations for everyone, since it's me talking and I do drink coffee, there'll be pauses and there'll be long draws and so forth because it's really a chance to spend our hour talking about a thing. I do also want to give respect to Mr. Robert Cole, who is always generous with his time in creating his weekly newsletter. And not to put taxation and efforts on him, we've created it so that we have current relevant topics to discuss each week with his newsletter. And we'll go through some of those highlights today as well. But the topic on creating an initial ad campaign is about deciding what your goal is, because that really will define the methodology. Pretty much in a progression of things. And this isn't a presentation that has PowerPoints or slides or what have you. It's about talking about what is first your goal. It's easy to state the obvious. Well, I want more business. That's not a goal. That's an ambition. I want more revenue. Same thing. It's really saying, what do I want? I want more reservations, or do I want better paying reservations? Do I want stronger percentage in my market as to what composes my market demand, how much of that I get? And now you're talking more related to the more traditional perspectives of Star Reports, Smith Travel Reports, as to percentage of your market and fair share and how your competitors are doing. Those are all modalities associated with your goals. Those are measuring aspects of your goal success based upon what you define. So, creating an ad campaign is based on what you're wanting to do with it because it truly defines who it is you're talking to. And not to be vague, let's be more particular about this. So, let's take a urban hotel downtown. Not a branded hotel that creates a whole different discussion as to usages of resources based on what the brand is offering. But say you have an independent hotel, 250 rooms, decent size, average size, and you are looking to first off make sure you have your fair market share, which is of your inventory of 250 rooms in comparison to your entire inventory in that market, in your area of market, your comp set. That represents a certain percentage. If, say, there is a total of 1,000 rooms that is available in the downtown market that you represent 250 of them, your fair share of the market is 25% of that 1,000 rooms that are available in your market. That's measured based on occupancy and ADR are your key factors of success with that. So, as a 250 room in an urban market, as an independent hotel, you have the latitude to define what are your strategies to getting those people to come in. To add a level of interpretation to this, there are tier levels. Your product in relation to your competitors in your market. How do you relate to them? Are you an upper scale, a mid upper scale, lower upper scale, upper mid scale, lower mid scale, upper low scale, mid lower scale, low scale? Um, if you're unfamiliar with that tiering, it's basically in reference to the product quality and amenities that you are offering in comparison to everyone else as it's categorized. To give you a sense, an upper scale would be something like a Four Seasons, Mandarin Orient. A upper mid scale would be a full flag Marriott. A lower mid scale, upper low scale would be limited service property branded. That gives you references. They're not in stone, and they're certainly not applicable in each market because, let's face it, some markets have value propositions that are a specific to their market, and you could be higher in your market simply by the brand quality of what you have, and yet you're still a limited service. You wouldn't be an upper scale, but just to say you're in comparison to your market set. So you're a 250 room hotel in an urban setting. You're 25% of your total market share value to market, and you are an independent hotel in comparison to other hotels that are at the same level you, which, let's just say, put a stick in the sand, you're a mid-scale market. You're a mid-scale hotel in a mid-scale market. From that, you're looking to not only maintain your market share, but you're looking to go over and expand your market share, which means taking business from others. Now, you may say, if I represent 25% of my market share with my total inventory, how do I do that? I don't build rooms on demand. It's not, because you're forgetting the variable of occupancy percentage. 100% occupancy is wonderful. To maintain it is impossible. Very few places in the world actually maintain full occupancy all the time, max rack. And what I mean by max rack is max rack rate, the highest available allowable rate that you can ask for your hotel in your market. It's basically the rate on the back of your door, which says this is the maximum we're allowed to charge as defined by our laws. Um, so, being the fact that you're not 100% occupancy at your max rack rate, you have a variability as to your percentage of occupancy. So, your market penetration, your ability to assume more occupancy for the full market of demand, is based on that. What we look at is, from a revenue management perspective, we have what's called a calculation called unconstrained demand. If I were to have unlimited inventory, how much demand is coming to my market? So, taking the example that we're creating, if we have 1,000 room market and we represent 250 rooms of that 1,000 room market, the demand to market might only be 500 rooms on a given day. If you're at 100% occupancy, you have literally 50% of all demand, but you have, in all essence, because of the amount of rooms that you have 200% market penetration, because you are twice that of comparison to the total market demand to market that you have. Sounds confusing. It really isn't, especially for revenue managers that are familiar with the metrics associated with this. But the idea, going back to our creating ad campaigns, is what are you trying to accomplish? It goes to some age old questions that we've had as to, are you driven by rate or are you driven by occupancy? It is literally a fork in the road for most hotels as to what is their primary value proposition that they're trying to bring to market in their strategy. From a revenue manager's perspective, if they're driving rate, meaning that they're trying to get the maximum allowable rate, that means by asking a higher rate, their occupancy may suffer for it. The old adage, which usually gets asked in most revenue management classes or anybody teaching revenue management, is, if you had a 100 room hotel, would you want 50% occupancy at $100, or would you like 100% occupancy at $50? And if you look at the math, ta-da, same dollars. But the question about that is to show the variability of the stress on your product. Every room that you rent is a diminishment of the value of that product. It gets worn down. So obviously, the less demand on your fixtures, your FF&E, your capital expense required to maintain it, all of those factors that go into it, the cost factor of maintaining a high occupancy hotel is much higher than a high ADR hotel. Unfortunately, it's not as black and white when it comes to strategy, because there's a mixed blend. There are market segments that you can push rate because they'll pay it, mainly corporate travel, which is why everyone's missing it so much. By the same token, you have other times that you have to lower your rate and look for the occupancy to drive business to your hotel that you wish you could charge more for, but in order to get their business, you have to charge less. And that, now we're talking about things like negotiated rates, what's called LNR, local negotiated rates for those in the IHG world. Um, and also consortiums, wholesalers, contractual relationships that you have, and groups, SMERF and corporate. That you, and SMERF, by the way, is social, it's military, educational, religious, fraternal, and those are your weddings. Those are your, or more hand-holding relationship groups. So, and then you have corporate travel and corporate conferences and meeting spaces and so forth, which is a contrast to those. So, when we talk about defining ad campaigns and creating ad campaigns, we really first have to define what the goal is, and the goal is related to, what is your strategy perspective, ADR or occupancy? What's the value proposition that you are providing? And then two, who is it now that that's defined that we're talking to? Demographics. What is the segmentation? Where are they coming from? Why would they be traveling? For the purpose of what segmentation you've created, and or is it for transient business, which is the leisure? And if so, what is the messaging that we have to create for that? I know I'm asking a lot more questions than I'm giving answers. So let me break this down so a little bit more. Let's define once again our example that we're creating from this as being uh, a 250 room hotel, 1,000 room total inventory and market, urban setting. We're looking for transient business. We're looking at for a seasonal business push, meaning we're in a location that at this time that we're looking to market for, we are in a higher demand for the surge of interest in our market. Let's take it to a real time example. Northeast has a good push for transient business for those that look at the changing of the leaves. People like driving and traveling for that. People like going to certain destinations for that. People have to travel through destinations to get to that. And they all have an influence on what we're advertising and how we are represented in that push of interest for the demand to our market. So if we know, let's just define this, that we're in an urban city in the Northeast, it's fall, as in now. We know that the seasons will be changing soon. And we know that we're going to have people that are interested in coming to our area of the world, our market, because of such a purpose. We start asking next questions. So we've defined the goal that we're looking to build more business, in this case, occupancy, because at this point we're looking to blend a good rate for the occupancy that it drives. It's a blend between the two. It's not an either or, it's an and. So we're looking to maximize our ADR for the demand to our market because we're in demand to improve our occupancy with a good ADR. We're not selling low just to fill rooms. We're selling as high as we can because we know people are interested in traveling to us. They have a purpose of travel and they're going to come to our area. Now, being that we're in an urban setting, they're not going to be staying with us due to the leaves. You know, we may have trees around the place, but it's not like going through the valleys. But we're near the places that they want to go to. So we're a hub of information. We're a hub of the travel destination that they're interested for. So because of that, we need to now see, we start retrograding our conversation. We know when they want to be with us, which was definitively the peak of interest to our market. Let's just say September 15th through October 15th. Okay, so we know we have a window of demand. That's 30-day demand cycle. We know now going backwards, there's a lead time, okay, of what's revenue manager is booking window, prime booking window. Okay, so knowing that people are looking to come to us, and because they know that it's harder to find a room in our market because of that time of year, they're going to look earlier because later means there may not be availability and or higher prices, which goes a little bit to our strategy. 3-4 months ago, we would be soliciting people to make their plans to come to our market during this time because of the demand cycle. There's a lot of marketing associated with don't miss out. This is your chance. For those that know, this is the time. These are the deals we have right now that we probably won't have when we get closer to the dates. So going backwards 4 months, that would be our campaign strategy. Who will we be talking to? And what channels will we be putting it on? That's what we're going to get to. Because now, with that in mind, we progress forward. Who then would be the people that we need to talk to? And then who then up to the point of the prime booking window, the opportunity that most people book in, according to revenue management, the lead time before their arrival. Revenue managers work in the scale of four quantified events. Prime booking window, lead time, 14, 21, 30 days out, whatever it is, of when people are most likely to be purchasing for certain dates. Then you have arrival time, length of stay, departure. So that's quantified data that revenue managers use to begin to yield their forecasts forward as to how do they determine business demand cycles as to know what to forecast for revenue generation. Excuse me, drinking coffee. Marketers have that information, should have that information working with the revenue managers, but they are predicated even earlier than that. In our world of marketing, we have earlier stages of information. We have 3 tiers of information that lead up to that point. That point that we're talking about is what's called ZMOT, zero moment of transaction or transition. When the person has decided that they've learned and acquired enough information to make the decision of purchase, which is the booking window. Not everybody falls in the booking window. That's just a peak in an apex of a bell of this is the prime time that people book, not the only time. So Prior to that moment is going in transcendence backwards up to that Z-mod is going back into the earliest stage is discovery. That's when people are thinking, look at there's an article about the changing of the fall leaves. I've never done that. Or you know what? I love when that happens. We should go. That process of, well, great. Well, there's a bunch of places to choose to see that. Where is it that they want to go do this? So they're discovering their options. They're looking at, if I want to do this, what is it that I need to educate? And there's three things that need to be educated from this: how to get there, where am I going to stay when I'm there, and what I'm going to do when I'm there. Those three things are instrumental. And it's been discussed many times as to which sequence they go. Really, that's like trying to decide for somebody what their first choice of decision is. It's not really, each person is different. Some people want to see, is it going to be too expensive for me to fly there, drive there, whatever it is? How much is it going to cost me to get there? And that goes into the convenience factor and what have you. Then if it is, it's like, where am I going to stay? How much is that? Where am I going to be? What's the best place to do this? And then the third is, once I'm there, other than going to see the leaves, where am I going to eat? What am I going to do? Is there anything else to go there? These are questions based in sequences of interest. So you have this discovery phase, which is probably the earliest inception. It also has the highest volume of audience. Just being aware of something doesn't mean you're interested in it. So in our advertising world, that's the most expensive place to be. That's the rarefied air of big brands, OTAs, destination, TCCs, CVBs. Those people play in that space of, hey, look at us. You want to come stay with us because of this reason. That's up there. Then, as you begin to transcend in timeline, they come into the phases of what's called education. Education is, I've decided I want to do this. Now I need to understand what that means. What am I going to do? Where am I going to stay? Where are the options for me to stay? What are my options of how to get there? What are my options of dining? What are my options of events? What are my options of discovery that I should understand in my decision process? That's the education. During this whole time, we always have to make sure that we're completely aware of making sure that if they do pull the trigger, because we don't know when this moment of transaction occurs, it could happen very early on or it could happen very late. But we always have to make sure it's available. We don't want to just always be, here's some info, hope you like it, and then they have to keep continually engaging with us before they make a choice. We always have to say, here's our information, hope you like this. By the way, if you're interested here, we always have to give them that transaction point, that ability to convert should they be interested at that moment, because we never know truly where we're catching them in the dialogue. So discovery phase, education phase. Now the education is beginning to come tailored down, and we're dealing with fewer people at this point. And this is where places like our example, we begin to intercede with people's interest in our market. We begin to go over and spend money to be in that discussion of education. Why us in comparison to someone else? Why, what can we offer that you're interested more particularly into? Then we get into the transaction push. Unfortunately, most companies' marketing efforts are at this point. Buy, buy, buy. You're looking at me, so I'm going to chase you down with retargeting. I'm going to chase you down with constant messaging. I'm going to hound you to death to make a choice to buy with me. Unfortunately, it's a blunted instrument, because by the time the people have gotten to the point where they are in the moment of transaction, they are looking to make a choice of where they're going to purchase, they have become mostly familiar and they get inundated and hence saturated with marketing messages that are not applicable to their decision process. It's like we're all clamoring to intercede the person before they walk into the door of the hotel with taking credit that they brought them to the hotel. Your best value is farther back into the education process, where you can create a relationship with them by giving them the information that they need to do what they need to do to make the choices that they have. That's the real value of marketing, is communication, allowing them to become aware of the things that they're interested in by making sure you're tailoring your message to what they're most interested in knowing about. Blunted broadcast messaging, blunted broadcast marketing is very ineffective. Think of it as like the used cars ads you see on TV all the time. If you're not in the market to buy a car, you ignore them. It's white noise. It's between the things that you're watching on the show. If you are interested or in the market of buying a car, you listen to each and every one of them because you want to see comparatively what everybody's offering that you have an option to choose from, or why you should choose them to begin with. Um, that idea goes back generations of, half of my marketing works well, but I just don't know which half. That's the marketing strategy. Just blunt object, saturate the market. There's merits to this, which we can talk about on another show by all means, that without being in the front of mind, you lose front of mind focus. But and that goes into repetition and familiarity and exposure and so forth. But the way it gets used is the way it gets abused by doing that. So going back to our example, we have a 250 room hotel, 1,000 room total inventory, urban market, northeast section, looking to sell rooms for transient business in the northeast. What do I do? Well, if you haven't done anything yet, the first thing you need to do is see what assets you have that you are aware of. Do you have guest history for people that have been with you during that same time, years past? What data is gold. um, what information do you have that is usable? From that perspective, how much of it are you aware of and how well can you use it? We are in the world of GDPR, CCPA, CAN spam, so forth. Have you, in this process up to this moment, made sure that you are allowed to use these people's data? Because remember, it's not your data, it's their data. The information that they have provided you for the transactions that you've had with them is a trust factor of confidence that you are controlling it to not be used for bad purposes or leaked out to people that aren't authorized to use it. So you are fortunately that they stayed with you, are able to communicate with those people due to the fact that they have done business with you, up to the point where they have told you straight up they don't want information from you anymore. The dreaded unsubscribe. And I'm talking more about emails at this point. But that data is more valuable than just beyond emails, because all too often, and we've all seen this, we get saturated from emails from places we didn't want. And even if we did want it at one time, the only way to stop it, because we don't need it now, is to unsubscribe. I've given many examples where one of the best things I ever did was on the post stay email engagement with our guests. We thanked them very much for the patronage. We showed them the options of things our other hotels had. But we also, most importantly, gave them the option to tell us when they would want to hear from us again. The reason being, think of it as an example, whenever we go on any vacation plan, like we're discussing as an example today, um, you sign up for things. You want to become aware. You're educating yourself, as we discussed in the educational phase. All right, I'm deciding this is the area I might be interested in going to. Let me sign up for all the things that people are offering. We have newsletters and notifications and how abouts and what ifs and so forth. That's great. I ended up going there. I ended up even staying with you. And then I'm done and I'm back home. But your information doesn't stop. And so I keep getting your email in my folder. And as much as I enjoyed being with you, I have no intention of being back with you in the near future, perhaps never at all. Maybe I'm going to pick another place next time. Or even if I am coming back with you, it's not in my mind for months. The problem is you don't know that. So you're sending information like, hey, this weekend we're doing such and such. Hey, this month, don't forget such and such. And I'm like, this doesn't apply to me anymore. And the only way for me to stop it is to unsubscribe. And now what I've done is literally slammed a door on you, so that until I think of where was I staying when I was there, and I don't have any more emails, and if I purged them out of my junk folder, I don't have any reference of it, hoping that I get remembering that you're there, and then maybe having to go back and look in the market again, and all of a sudden you start marketing me. Oh yeah, that's the place. Yeah. Well, you have spent more money restarting me again as a repeat guest when we could have done it better by saying, hey, let me let you know, when do you want us to contact you again? And I thinking, I might be back next year, same time. So next August. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Back August, September. And that way we put them in that folder that come next August. Hey, this new group of people are in our email send that asked that we start sending them information at this time. And we're like, we would do a wake up email. Hey, it's been a while, it's been great. Hopefully you're all excited about coming with us again. Here's what you missed, or here's what's coming up. And now all of a sudden I have a great relationship again, loyalty of being detailed to that personalization of getting that kind of content. So that's one aspect of the marketing conversation we're having today, is making those defined roles in that sense. But that was a huge benefit. Our unsubscribe went to almost nothing because of that. Because people did want to continue to go and visit our hotels and be with us. They just didn't want the clutter of our emails on a regular basis. So nugget of information there. So here we are. We have our hotel. We're looking to sell. We're not at this moment trying to sell our hotel. We're back in time. We know this is going to happen in the middle of September through the middle of October. We know people are going to come and stay with us because we're a great hub of exploration to our market, being in the Northeast, being around the change of season. We're urban hotel. So there's the reason why we're in contrast, which we should know about ourselves in our market study, is that for the hotels that are in the rural areas, that's it. You're there. There's not much to do other than being at the hotel and driving around to see the local fauna and flora, trees. Where it being in the urban setting, you have choices of dining, and there's other venues, and there's also things to do that might be different, museums and things like this, which you should know about yourself already. You should know your value proposition of your location. What is it that you can do when you're at your hotel? What makes your location of your hotel alluring for people for what they want to do? All the choices included, not just for what you're interested in. So because of that, our market strategy is going to be about hubbing yourselves, and keep remembering that everybody's travel experiences is based literally when they stay with you from your perspective. No matter where you go in travel, your experience is driven by where you stay. It's an amazing power we have in hospitality as hoteliers to know that we have that influence on people's perspective, literal perspective on where we're located in the world. So keeping that, with great power comes great responsibility for the Avenger fans, um, is the idea that we are now going to talk to people from the value proposition in the discovery and educational phase primarily, about what we have as a value proposition. So we know our messaging now. We know our transient business. Now, what do we know about our transient business? Is it with families? If so, what is the average age of kids? I think for anybody that's been a parent, they definitely know the difference between traveling with a 5 to 7 year old, a 7 to 9 year old, 11 to 13, and a 13 and up. Literally, it's everything is focused on their satisfaction on the earlier age, and later on, you're lucky to have them travel with you. Just saying. So, with that spectrum, and understanding from your guest history, the information you may have from people who have stayed with you in the past years, what is that persona that we are dealing with? What is the relative age? What is the relative income? What is the relative family structure to these people? And it's not to only cater to that persona that you've created. It's to know that that is a linchpin of a good starting core point. We know there's diversity to everyone that stays with us every day, and it's just not transient. And it is hopefully more business than what we're getting here now, but it is business as well. And because of that, we have to make sure that we don't pigeonhole ourselves, that we only pander to these people and ignore everybody else. We just know from a marketing perspective that these are the people that are the most likely to be interested in our messaging at this time for this information, for this type of stuff. So going into that demographics of, and let's make this up, it's a family of four with an average income of 70 to 90,000. And how do you know these things? Well, there's lots of tools, and we can reference to some of these as we discuss, based on which platform, that we can determine what this is. And we know just from our own life experiences that there's certain percentages that families have to spend towards that are financially viable. You're dealing with the fact that you have uh, certain amounts for your mortgage. You have certain amounts for your your car leases and so forth. There's certain amounts that are income required, and you can tell by the people that come in, by the things that they drive, by the things that they carry with them, by the very demeanor of how they spend, what the average potential income would be. Plus, also too, there's tools again like Facebook Insights that allow you to um, hone in on that. You can look at interests, like, for instance, seasonal change, Northeast, and look at who is interested in them, and then start changing filters as to the audience size. Literally, but if you start changing family type and or income and or geography, okay, you can see the audience size. There's a little meter on the right hand side that tells you how many people you might be potentially talking to, and that gives you a good sense of validating your perception of who you think walks in your door. This is where it's invaluable from the property's perspective to know its people as they come in. Um, when you're doing this kind of thing, when you're looking at this, it is all about also augmenting what you're offering. Obviously, if you have people that have the income capability of taking on the fact that you're at a prime season for yourself, and it's going to cost money to stay with you because you're going to have a higher rate. That means that they're going to need a higher income. When you add that into your research from where they come from, which is the geographies, which again, going back to the data that you do have, which is those people that have stayed with you in times past, you can see their zip codes. You know where they generally come from. There's a lot of common sense to this when it comes to the idea that you have basically three radiants of drive travel. You have those people that are eminently around you, which are usually within the 150 mile range. You have those people, and that's a 2 hour drive, 2 to 3 hour drive, depending. Then you have those that are in the moderate range, which is the 150 to 300 mile range, and that is your 4 to 6 hour drive, depending. And now we'll get back to why these radians are important. But then you have your long haulers, which are beyond 300 miles. Now, let's classify based on your demographics what we're kind of talking about. 3 hour driving is get up at a reasonable time in the morning and enjoy your drive and get there, and then have the rest of the day and evening to enjoy where you're at. 4 to 6 hour drive is also potentially getting up at a reasonable time, getting there later in the day, but having time to settle in and then do something for that evening. Beyond the intermediate driving, you have the long haul of now it's a 6 hour plus day. You've started early and you've arrived sometime in the evening there so that you can enjoy the next day. All those have different criteria as to the demographics. If you're traveling with kids, you exactly know what I mean as to their duration in the car. Obviously, that influences your travel choice decisions if it's a drive market. Now, flying, different thing. Flying then allows different variations, but then you can tell by the zip codes where people tend to fly in from. And from that, you know where they have to fly through, and you can coordinate accordingly. So, given our examples of what we're dealing with, we're probably going to say that our hotel, a 250 room hotel, based in a urban setting, based in 1,000 room inventory in that urban setting in the Northeast for fall sales, for seasonal change, looking at the demographics that have historically come to us, looking to get into their education period time of what they're doing. We look at the geography where they're coming from for the drive that they're looking for, and say that we're looking for drive market. We're looking for drive market that was in a 150 mile radius and a 300 mile radius as being the most probable for people to come in. And unless we have a good airport service to the urban area that we're in, most likely, because when you're not flying directly into our urban area and you have to create a reconnection to a smaller hopper, you start dealing with additional expenses and additional efforts, and that also reduces our families. So demographics lead this conversation. Once you identify those demographics and you look to identify their personas based on the historical data that you have, and you look at the time of year that they're looking for and the propensity for them to purchase in, now you have the ability to begin to target. Targeting first comes from what channel you're looking to use based on the optimism of its usage by the demographics you're talking about. What do I mean by this? Some platforms are better for certain demographics. If we're, because of this example, we're looking at transient business, automatically social platforms come into the dialogue because they're used for exploring and educating and discovering. More so because of transient travel interests, where they're looking at inspirational conversation, inspirational content. And from that, social is a great add to that. If it's a corporate travel or group travel and or all those other travels that require negotiation of rates and relationships, it's more factual and functional. That's where more paid ad campaigns come into play, because you're really trying to make sure you're in front of the right people that are the decision makers of that process. With transient business, it's not that paid isn't beneficial, but social platforms add and augment a tremendous amount of content in that dialogue of discovery and education that we talked about. So, given our example that we're creating and given the targeting that we're now looking for, we look at Facebook as an example of first step, first stick to look at, largest gorilla in the base when it comes to social media engagement. If you should always have a presence on these platforms for a variety of reasons, but given that you may have a business page for your hotel, you would begin to seed this progression of information through a means of organic content. Organic meaning you're not paying for it. The detriment is your audience size, unless loyal to you, and even if loyal to you, doesn't really see it much anyway, is that you're creating a lot of content that you're going to be using in reference to your ad campaigns that are going to be enrolling in. So looking at the timeline that we discussed, where we're trying to sell the hotel between September 15th and October 15th, and going back in time previous to the primary booking windows and arrivals and length of stays and everything else that we talked about, revenue management, going prior to that into past the ZMOT into the education up towards the discovery, you're wanting to begin to create content that's valuable for the demographics you're looking for. The demographics being that they're traveling from a 150 to 300 mile radius max, family, roughly 4. Usually kids between 7 to 13 years old are the range that people are looking for this kind of fun stuff to do. Below 7 doesn't appreciate the color changes of the driving around. They're just knowing they're with mom and dad and they're going to a different place. So upwards of 7, below 13, because above 13 they lose interest in doing that kind of stuff as much as those below that age. Not that they don't. From that, that usually means that weekends are a high primary because it's a non-school versus school combination, because school's in season during September and October for most places, minus any gaps. They're looking probably for a 2 to 3 day stay, which means that's why the short range of driving is important, because they need to get there sooner rather than later and not take as much time either way coming to and from, because that takes away from the time from being there. So now we know it's a 2 to 3 day stay over the weekends. They might take a Friday off so they can leave Thursday. They might take a Monday off so they can come back. So over the weekend cycle, length of stay 2.5, 3 days is usually the average time for that. And we know that in order to do that, based on the rates that you're normally charging for a premium of demand for your market, let's just say for rate now, it's $200 a night. So at $200 a night at a 2 day stay, one room only, given the age of the kids, that means they sleep in the second bed. Might be 2 rooms, but we're not getting there right now. One room, double occupancy, at least, 2 beds at least. For family of 4 at $200, 3 days total, $600 saved total stay minus any taxes or anything, plus food per day of at least $150, considering that you're dealing with food for kids and food for adults. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. If you offer breakfast included, always an asset. We can get to that about market strategy at another time, or messaging at that time. But you start accumulating that up and you realize that this trip is around $1,500 choice for a family of 4, 3 days, distance of 150 to 300 miles to you, from markets that are feeder markets to you. Now you have a definition of demographics, you have a definition of total budget, what you put in content as to what you're offering of events or places to go or things might be tailored about affordability. This restaurant's great and it's affordable. This restaurant's convenient so that they're not taking much time out of their day waiting for breakfast and starting later and getting in lines of cars driving through, forested fields to see the leaves change and get stuck where they want to start it earlier. And maybe by offering breakfast yourself, if you're full service, as we discussed in this example, having the opportunity to share the fact that you can get up really early. We offer breakfast even earlier, so you can get out in the road and get early ahead of everybody else and see this before everybody else. See the mist in the valley, or whatever the value proposition of the messaging is. But now, what we've done is we've taken our hotel, a 250-room hotel based in an urban area in the Northeast, for a fall campaign associated with seasonal change, identified the demographics by family, by size, by income, by duration of stay, by average ADR capable of financing. So we understand their relative income level to drop $1,500 for a 3 day trip in fall. Distance from and possible, most probable feeder markets and places to market for. And we've decided that social is a great medium to create that content as initial. It's not the only, it's the initial. We would then put content relevant to that demographic on social. It wouldn't be the only content we're putting on there, but we'd make sure that that content is put on social so that they can discover it in their process of discovery. Like, okay, we're thinking about doing this. Let's find out more information. So now we put the top 5 things a family shouldn't miss when visiting for the seasonal change in XYZ market that we're in, or the benefits of being located in this city and all the things you can see in 3 days. This city on a tank of gas. Okay, because basically 300 miles is a tank of gas. Think of it in just terms of reality of the logistics that families have to consider in getting to you. Now you've created the platform of discovery, the content that's going to be used on that platform discovery, speaking to the demographics that will be using that platform. Things to consider. If you're then beginning to move that organic content that's there and available and using it as reference to your paid social campaigns, now you start saying, well, when do these people tend to look at social related to these stuff? And you begin to know that statistically, on average, Saturday mornings are a great time to talk to families, because the mom or dad get up either before or while the kids are around, and they do more of their family focused discovery on social. They're not distracted with their work requirements. They're not distracted with those things as much as they have the chance to kind of catch up on what's going on Facebook. Let's just scroll and pick and poke and things. And that's when you want to show up for stuff like that. So if you're going to do paid campaigns, you want to make sure that if you're pushing this kind of stuff to that demographic profile, and remember all these things we discussed are focusable and filterable on places like Facebook, like Twitter, like Twin Pinterest. All the platforms have these kind of functionalities. We're just picking on Facebook in particular for this conversation. Now, from this, you're putting them what's called a funnel. The funnel is your progression of engagement with them. And what I mean by that is, okay, so you've engaged them with organic content on social and they're interested. They maybe follow your page if they didn't already know about you. They respond to your ads. In other words, they clicked on what it is that you offered in your ad of the content that you've placed on social, sharing the 5 things you shouldn't forget kind of thing. And from that, you create a customization list. These are people that engaged with us, they either organically or paid. We can define that. And they're in the parameters. We can make the geographic parameters we're talking about and the demographic parameters. And we create what's called custom audiences, audiences that are defined by these criteria that we've created, that they responded to our ad or what have you. We have choices to this. We have the ability to retarget them. That's fine in the platform itself. But we can also use that information to target them in other means of communication, which is the funnel discussion. We then can go over and solicit them that if you want more detailed information, sign up for our newsletter. If you would like to get a certain offer value of what we can do for packaging or ticketing or whatever it is that we're having as a solicitation of value, we can go over and put it in so that if they engage with that, we're bringing them down a progression of information based on the distance between this information being engaged and the actual events that we're referring to. That leads to what's called a frequency pattern. If it's a smaller amount of time, your frequency pattern is much higher. If it's a longer period of time, it's much more elongated. You're not wanting to annoy them with saturation of everywhere they go. And we all have had that experience. Is this freaking ad from this place because I hit their website once? Really? I'm now more irritated with them than I am happy with them. So if it's where I'm looking to book or looking, I'm interested in this market, but it's only 2 weeks out, I only have 2 weeks to convince this person that I'm the place they want to stay. So I will increase my frequency, yes, over those 2 weeks compared to if it was 2 months. If I had 2 months, I could elongate that conversation to make sure and also ask questions of, is this something you're interested in? Do you really hike? Because if you don't hike, I'm not going to talk to you about the hiking stuff because it's not anything you're interested in. But if you're interested in culinary, family adventures, soft adventure, off the beaten path, cultural, where historic stuff, when you begin to ask those one at a time questions, that if when they engage, a simple solicitation of, hey, you interested in historical stuff? And if they answer yes or no or not at all means I'm not even going to bother with it. If they answer yes is the only one you're going to react to, you're going to put them in another category of content. The more you can begin to identify uniqueness of their interest in your market, the more you can give them more relevant content to them in the progression of time for them to get to that ZMOT, that moment of transaction where they decide that this is what I want to do. And so for that reason, from a marketing perspective, going all the way back to our discussions, we're talking about a fictitious 250 room hotel that is a mid-scale hotel that's in a mid-scale market comp set in a downtown urban city in the Northeast, discussing the potential of how to sell seasonal change demand to market season, just business cycle demand to market of a September 15th to October 15th window, identifying the demographics of being a family of 4 with an average age of the family's children being between 7 and 13, for a 2 to 3 day stay with an average ADR of $200 for a 3-day total stay, inclusive of including the total value proposition, what they'd have to spend to do there, based on the distance of 150 to 300 miles. Looking to go over and have things that they're interested in doing by the segmentation they offer in their engagement, hoping for them to purchase and book through a booking window optimization of around 21 days out or farther out, because of the demand to market means the prices will go up. So we have an earlier booking window than we normally would with short-term booking. And it's a transient-based discussion for a social media platform on Facebook, targeting their demographic interests based on content that we're providing, then enhancing that through a funnel process of them paying for placement at optimum times for them to see messaging related to content that they've already identified as being interest or we feel is interestingly enough valuable to our market for them to understand, and the hopes that they engage with us. And then that brings us to the point of them purchasing something. And that purchase is based on a equal blend of ADR availability to the market because of the higher demand, at an occupancy without selling out because we're asking for a higher ADR. So there's a balance of we're not going high on occupancy and throwing away rate, and we're not maxing rate out and throwing away occupancy. We're blending the demand of rate availability to the business interest to the demand cycle we have to market. We talked about the fact that that was based on what was called unconstrained demand. If we looked at everybody looking to come to our market, how does that compare to the total inventory to our market? How much inventory are we missing? And that comparison is drawn to our total 250 rooms to 1,000 rooms available, meaning we represent 25% of our total market volume. Knowing that if we get more than that based on the total demand to market, which is, say, only 500 room demand, and we get our full fair share of inventory, we're at a 200% market penetration. We talked about how that fixes and works. Okay. And so now we only talked about one thing, which was identifying where one platform in our dialogue. As it progresses in the timeline towards the point of them staying with us and going into the position of conversion, prime booking window, and then the actual arrival date, length of stay, departure, we have to begin to bring other platforms into play, as into validating or confirming the decision for people to make the purchase with us. That goes into paid platforms like Google Paid, in which you can target as equally well as, if not better in some ways, than Facebook. There is the perhaps Bing is a better alternative. And these are based on researching those platforms as to the amount of volume of traffic related to their interest in your market. In this case, seasonal fall changes and your value proposition. So you can go to tools like Google Trends and say, hey, let's look up these things. And it'll show you in a linear graph, a timeline being the stretch point, the x axis, as to when people begin to look for this stuff. Then you can see that a lot of people look for this stuff as far back as April and say, wow, they're already looking at what they want to do in October because they know a lot of people want to do that. So the sooner they get their arrangements made and their plans done, the sooner they can lock in their rates and prices and have it as a part of their scheduling. So knowing that means already you have to make sure that you are providing information in a way and to things that they're interested in about this stuff that far back. That's why marketing and revenue management have the differences that they do. Revenue management we talked about was booking window, arrival, duration, departure. That's their facto points. Marketing has facto points as to ZMOT, education, discovery. The discovery is where you begin the inception of conversation. That's where you begin to provide content that people begin to discover. And again, you're faced with challenges because obviously Facebook is a pay for platform. You pay to play. And even though people may be very fascinated with your content and also fascinated with you, doesn't mean they're going to see everything you do. You're really doing a lot of that content for those that do discover it, but also you're able to use it as catalyst for when you begin to pay to play at the right time. Spend your money at the time that's most impactful, and say now people are really focused on making decisions educationally as to coming for fall season. Now let me pay and refer to content that was there before so that they see and can scroll up. And now what they came in, saw what I pointed out to them, and they followed my paid link to it. But now they get to be exposed to all the other stuff that might they be like, wow, this is a really great site. I'm so glad I found this. Or this is great content. I want to follow these people. Okay. Also keep in mind that your content should be relevant on your website as it relates to your social. So there's an affirmation. It's just not on your social because they may not scroll sufficiently to find it. You want the content that's most relevant also on your website, because really in all actuality, you want them to be following your site. Social is a dialogue. Your site is a source. And so you want them to be connected to your source to keep in connection with you on a more permanent basis. As we've talked on the show many times before about first party cookie data versus third party. You want direct engagement with your website because that means that you have the right to continue dialoguing and tracking what they're doing with you because they connected directly with you. You're not relying on a third party to share data with you. So the more you can drive them to your core content, the more that you have content that is relevant to them to come to your site, the more valuable that data becomes to you in this kind of strategy we're talking about. So we've created the scenario. We've gone back. We've shown you what we're trying to push and to whom we're trying to push it for. We've shown back the timelines of the progression backwards between the ZMOTs, the education to the discovery phase of it. And we've talked about just in some basic direct ways how to actually start ad campaigns. That's the progression. How I brought you through the example was the progression of discovery of what you do. It's just not, gee, we want to sell more rooms or gee, we want to make more revenue. It's what exactly you want to do. How are you defining that? What are your KPIs to that? And then going back and creating the methodology that is using the KPIs you've prescribed towards this definition of the goal that you're getting. Also, I hope you notice out of the discussion from this is that revenue management's collaboration with marketing is acritical. Now, in this example, we only referred to transient as the example being used, but group is an integrated component of this. And not saying you're not going to talk to your salespeople, sorry, coffee, because you're dealing with transient market strategy is to really hurt yourself. It's a mix and a blend. First off, sales always has insights to the empathetic interest in your content of your product because they're in that space. They are always hearing people's feedback about the hotel and or why they like the hotel, want to go to the hotel, what they find interesting about the hotel. So blinding yourself to not hearing that is blinding yourself. Sorry. The idea also too is that through that active collaboration, you as a marketer will be able to contribute to the sales strategy discussion as much as a salesperson potentially could contribute to your marketing strategy. When you work in a bubble, you're echoing your own sentiment. From that means that you may think this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, but in all honesty, if you put it in front of anybody else, would be like, dude, that's common. That's not as special as you think it is, and may not even be right, really. So having that good relationship with sales, even though you may not be talking about group sales or negotiated sales at this time, is a critical component to the discussion of market value and market impact. And the more that this fluidity between it and sales and revenue management begins to happen, the more unified the messaging becomes for everything that you're doing, both transient and group. Now, imagine not just keeping it within that nexus of three, but expanding it to now also include operations so that they're the ones that literally fulfill everything you all are doing. And the kiss of death for any marketing campaign, as we all know, is the front desk person that when the guest comes in going, I'm here to take advantage of the XYZ promotion. And the front desk person going, I don't know what you're talking about. That's the worst thing in the world because we get them all the way to the hotel to experience what we've told them they're going to experience, only to let them down that we didn't, in our own internal communication, make sure operation was on board of the fact that this is what we were telling people. So you begin to include them to that. And that doesn't stop there. Then you go into, well, are the right people trained for what they're doing, which means HR is now included because HR has to find the right people. And we all know right now that is a highlight actual demand requirement to our operations is the lack of bandwidth in our group, and we're unfortunately maybe taking on people that haven't been educated enough in their role to do a good job at it, which only discourages them for staying, and they end up leaving after we've done all that effort of getting them acquired. So the more we educate them on what it is that we're doing and their role in it, the more they feel fulfilled and less stressed because they feel like they're a part of the process. So it's integrated that the operations has to be a part of that. HR has to be a part of that to make sure that that dialogue and education awareness and quality of talent is in the right role and right position. But wait, there's more. Also accounting, just having a relationship on billing and having a price and quote and things and contracts and service agreements and everything else, and then just handing it over to accounting saying, we'll pay these bills when they come in. A lot of times, a lot of these platforms overlap each other. These campaigns overlap each other. And in the sense of who takes credit, attribution, which is a term that we will talk about in the show again. We've talked about it many times before. We'll talk about it more concisely in the upcoming shows. Is who gets credit for these things as they come through. And from an accounting's perspective, that turns into a very critical component because some places will take credit for the same driving of business because of their tracking setup that other businesses are also doing. And the accountant, not knowing the contract relationship conditions of that, just simply say, when an invoice comes in, I pay it. And all of a sudden, you're wondering why your flow through from top line revenue to net is diminished. And you might find out that you're paying two platforms the same credit commission for the same one single piece of business. So accounting has to be a part of this dialogue as well to know what are the marketing strategies. So they start asking smart accounting questions. Okay, so what is my criteria for paying this bill? How do I verify the invoicing compared to the contract relationship that you're creating? How does this affect us in comparison to other billing? Are we obligating ourselves financially to other people? They start asking smart questions. So accounting is a critical component in that dialogue too. Now, we're not trying to create a camel out of a horse by committee on this. Everyone has a role based on the value of the current conversation. In our example that we gave today, sales would be probably the first foremost inclusion to that conversation. I would say would be necessary because it influences what they have available to sell and how to sell it. Obviously, with a high transient demand for a fall seasonal change in the Northeast area, it is less likely that they're going to have group block availability because one, their rate that they have to ask for group is lower than transient demand rate. And two, they may not have availability of accommodations or block sizes enough to actually sell anything to anybody that's worth being considered. The other is operational fulfillment always. If we're offering packages or value propositions to people staying, we need to make sure operations is fully fluent on what those relationships are. We're offering a great XYZ package that includes not just our regular breakfast, but we'll send you over a whole big stack of pancakes, and that's not normal for us. Guess who should know that? Operations. Operations should be familiar with what it is that we're doing. We might think it's the greatest idea, man. They let's love our pancakes. Meanwhile, whoever's opening the kitchen that day, that morning, when the first one comes through and then wasn't informed as to what that is, they're the ones like, I ain't giving no pancakes to nobody. That costs X dollars like we normally do. And now all of a sudden, that promotion that was so beneficial to get them in the door is now reviewed poorly. Like, we all have to face consumer sentiment. And it's not just the fact that we perturbed a person; it's the fact that they don't often tell the right people at the time that they're there, and we find that post mortem. And now we're in damage control to try to get back to them, saying, "Well, we're so sorry that happened to you while you're with us. We wish we had known while you were with us that had happened, so we could have done something about it." But unfortunately, that happens usually in reverse. So making sure that the players are together. So in all the examples we gave about this fall promotion during a 250 room hotel and 1,000 room inventory urban market setting, and all the other things we discussed about it, I would say the integrations would be not just revenue marketing, sales, and operations, basic, must have to make sure that everything goes the way it's intended, and that the offers and the solicitations and the impacts are all mutually shared. As to operations might come back going, that is just logistically impossible. I can't express check in what you're offering because I don't have the manpower to diverse another desk over there that says these people are special, go there. It would just create a riot in the lobby or something. Having that feedback is critically important. So I hope this has helped a lot in the defining of what this is to do to create an ad campaign. There are pieces that influence other things, obviously, as we know that, but to just blind blunt and say we want more revenue or more rooms or more business, or that's just being, I wouldn't say naive, but not as advanced as you need to have when it comes to tackling and approaching the process and methodology. Defining who you are, critical. Defining what you want, next critical. Defining how you're going to identify that or quantify that, KPIs, next critical. Then defining the methodology to do this and the measurements with your KPIs to do so, next critical. Identifying then what it is you're going to be offering, next critical. That's the progression I would give in the sense of approaching your ad campaigns, creations, and so forth. So thank you, Steph, for jumping in. Joshua, of course, and we had a few popped in and out. We have others on the other, and thank you so much for everyone that has joined us. This is our new format. As I said, kicked this off by saying that I was going to take on the first ones. You will see other co-hosts come in. They will have their other additional co-hosts come with them, depending on who they would like. I didn't actually invite anybody to today, but the intent of it is that our ongoing weekly live TV show broadcast, which is on TV, it's on Roku if you would like it, Apple TV, Amazon Prime, Google TV. In addition to all of our social rebroadcast, simulcast podcasts on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, they're all there already. But and also on Twitch, so we're actually on Xbox and PS5s and stuff like that. So this is our format: 1 hour, single topic, which will begin to get a lead in. We'll start like now, today, I'll start approaching what next week's topic will be. So you'll have a familiarization if you can have the opportunity to schedule yourself for joining us. It'll be an hour-long show. We will have a rotation of lead hosts where I may not be the only one on the show or from the show at all. I might just moderate it in the back, make sure all the technology works. But we'll do this on a weekly basis. Going forward, if you would like to participate with us and be that co-host, by all means, please reach out to me at Lauren at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. I answer each and all emails. Of course, as a reminder to everyone, in addition to us being on the TV channel, Hospitality Channel, and all of our simulcasts that we have, we will recast this on Wednesday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Sydney time, or a.m. Sydney time, 11:30 a.m. London time, and we will, of course, have our other podcast, which is Hospitality Marketing Podcast, Hospitality Reputation Management, Hospitality Sales, and Hospitality Meta Search are all of our podcasts we run each week as well. So with that, thank you, everyone, for the privilege of your time. And we look forward to talking to everyone next week. Bye, everybody. Mindset that exists at a hotel in the Asian community that is not like what we have here in our culture. There is a mutual share or sink mentality with a team in the Asian culture at a hotel. From whoever you connect with, and Dean, I've talked about when we stayed at hotels in China and stuff.
Mhm.
When you talk to anybody in that organization, you might as well be talking to the CEO of it, because even though they recognize tiers and responsibilities and leadership and everything else,